Mum, Dad, I've been reading since 10:30 yesterday. This story is about the 83rd story, and it's for you too. And it's because this is a story that I remember my mum telling me when I was younger, and it was one of my favouriteest stories ever, and I know how much my mum likes the Greeks. So here we go. This is Jason and the Golden Fleece. Okay. A long time ago in the country of Thessaly there lived two children, a boy called Phrixus and his sister Helle. Some would have said they were lucky children, for their father was a king. Not only that, they'd been befriended by the young god Hermes, and he'd given them a pet ram to play with, a wonderful ram with a fleece of gold. But all was not well, for there was one person in the palace who did not love the children. Ino, their wicked stepmother, was jealous of Phrixus and Helle, and secretly she plotted their deaths. And so it happened that no rain had fallen that summer. Month after month the sun scorched down, and nothing would grow. Ino saw her chance. "My lord," she said to the king, "the gods must be punishing us. Let me send to Delphi. The oracle will tell us what to do. The oracle always knows." "Very well, Ino," said the king. "Go and consult her. I will do everything she tells me to do." Ino laughed to herself, for her plan was working. Then she called two of her servants to her. "Go to Delphi and consult the oracle," she told them, "but then forget her words. Wipe them from your minds, and when you return here I shall tell you what to say to the king." A month later the messengers returned, and were summoned before the king. "Well," said the king, "what says the oracle?" "We bring sad tidings," said the messengers. "If the rains are to return, an offering must be made. Phrixus and Helle, your two children, must be sacrificed to the gods." Sorrowfully the king led his children to the altar where they would be slain, but just as they approached the temple something extraordinary happened. The ram stopped, and it seemed to Phrixus and Helle that a voice was talking to them, very quietly, so no one else could hear. "Climb on my back," said the voice, "and hold tight to my fleece." The children did as they were told, and suddenly the ram rose into the air and flew away, high above the people's heads, carrying them to safety. On and on the ram flew, and below them they saw the sea and the islands, white towers and temples, fields and ships. The children began to grow tired. "Hold on," said the ram, "we shall soon be there." Phrixus tightened his grip on the fleece and held on grimly, but poor Helle became sleepier and sleepier. Finally her eyes closed in sleep, and she let go on the ram. Down, down she fell, down, down to the sea. The waters closed over her, and that place where she was drowned is named after her to this day, the Hellespont. Meanwhile, Phrixus and the ram flew on until they came at last to the country of Colchis by the Black Sea. The long journey was over, and one of the children had lived to tell the tale. The ram, however, was so tired and wearied by the long journey that it fell down and died. And when the people of Colchis heard what had happened to the miraculous ram, they decided to honour its memory. They stripped off its golden fleece and hung it on a tree in the wood. Then, so that no thief could ever steal the fleece, they set a monstrous dragon to guard it. The years went by, and Phrixus grew up to be a man, and then he in turn became old and died. Meanwhile, back in Greece, another young hero was growing up. His name was Jason, and he was of royal blood. By rights he should have been the next king of Iolchos, but his wicked uncle had seized the throne for himself. And for his own protection Jason's friends had sent him away to the mountains, where his uncle could not reach him. There Jason spent his youth, but when he was fully grown he set off back to Iolchos to claim his throne. After he journeyed for 2 days he came to a river in a flood. He was about to leap in and swim across when he heard a voice. It was an old woman. "Help me," she cried. "The current is strong, and I am old and weak. Will you carry me across?" "Gladly," said Jason. Then lifting her up, he bore her across the flooded river. He had to struggle hard, and in the course of the crossing he lost one of his sandals in the water. But in the end they came safely across. And Jason set the old woman down. "You have done well today," said the old woman. Then quite suddenly she vanished. It was no ordinary old woman. It was Hera, queen of the gods, who had disguised herself to test Jason, and he had proved himself worthy of her protection. From this day forth the gods would go with him. Jason continued on his journey down the city and went straight to the palace. "I've come to see Peleus," he said to the guards, and he was shown in to the king. When Peleus saw Jason, he turned white with terror. It had been prophesied long ago that he would lose his throne to a man who only wore one sandal, and the first thing he noticed about Jason was that he had just one foot bare. "Who are you?" he asked fearfully. "I am Jason, your nephew, whom you thought dead, and I have come to claim my rightful throne." Now Peleus was as cunning as he was cowardly. "Gladly I will surrender my throne," he said, "for it is a wearisome business to rule. There is a curse on this country, and the curse will not be lifted until the Golden Fleece of Phrixus is brought back to us. If you are strong enough to bring back the fleece, you are strong enough to be king. Will you do it?" Without hesitation, Jason left the palace and began his preparations, and Peleus, the wily king, watched him go with a crooked smile on his lips, for he believed that Jason was going to his doom. News spread fast of Jason's brave mission, and young men flocked to join him. This was their chance for glory and adventure. Together they built a new, fine ship. The hills all around rang to the sound of their axes as they worked, and they named their vessel the Argo, and Jason called his company of men the Argonauts. In 3 months they were ready, and one fine morning they set off. It was a journey that was to take many months. On the way they pulled in at an island to take on more stores, and the king of the island was a blind man called Phineas, who led a wretched life. Not only was he blind, but he was persecuted by some flying monsters called harpies, evil smelling creatures, ugly and horrible. So greedy were they that whenever food was put on the table for King Phineas, they swooped down and seized it for himself, and poor Phineas had not had a proper meal for years. The Argonauts were shocked at his plight and promised to chase the harpies away. A banquet was laid for the king, and they settled down to wait. Sure enough, in a matter of minutes the harpies arrived and swooped down, screeching their horrible cries. But this time they were in for a nasty surprise. They were met by a hail of arrows from the Argonauts, and they flew away in terror, never to return again. Phineas thanked Jason from the bottom of his heart, and to repay the Argonauts for their services, he told them the secret of the clashing rocks. To reach Colchis, he told them, you'll have to sail between 2 giant rocks, which every now and then clash together and crush what is passing through. When you arrive at these rocks, this is what you must do. Release a white pigeon. If it flies safely through, that is a sign that the gods are with you and will protect you. But if your pigeon is crushed by the rocks, you are doomed. The Argonauts thanked the old man and sailed away. On they travelled day after day, until one morning they heard a rumbling like distant thunder. It was the clashing rocks, and as they drew closer they saw them rising out of the sea, like 2 gigantic teeth. Even as they watched, they saw the 2 rocks smash thunderously together. "We must turn back," said the Argonauts. "No," Jason told them, "we must trust in Phineas. Release the pigeon." The Argonauts watched anxiously as the bird flew towards the narrow gap. It flew straight as an arrow. Hungrily the rocks began to close like the jaws of a wild beast, and the bird was swallowed up, or so it seems. But when the rocks opened up again, a great shout rose from the Argonauts, for there was the pigeon, flying safely away on the other side. "Row," cried Jason, "row, men, row as you've never rowed before." The sea boiled beneath their oars, and next minute the Argo too had shot safely through the gap, only a fraction of a second before the jagged black rocks crashed together again. They were safe, and before them lay the open sea. After many more adventures, they finally reached their destination, and when they arrived at Colchis, they were met by King Aeetes. He greeted them and asked them their business. "We've come to bring back the Golden Fleece," Jason told him. "There is a curse on the land, which will never be lifted until the fleece is returned to us." King Aeetes trembled with anger, and he was determined to send this bold young stranger to his doom. "You shall have the fleece," he said, "but only if you can prove yourself a better man than me. Tomorrow you must yoke the fire-breathing bulls, and then you must sow the sacred field of Ares with dragon's teeth, and then you must kill the guardian serpent. Do that, and you may have the fleece." "I accept your challenge," said Jason, and he turned away to prepare himself for the fearsome task. Aeetes laughed to himself, for he knew that the things he had demanded were impossible. But unknown to him, his daughter Medea had fallen in love with the handsome stranger. She was a sorceress gifted with magic powers, and that night she came to Jason with a magic ointment made from secret herbs. "Rub it on yourself," she told him, "and it will protect you from the flames of the bulls. Otherwise you'll be burnt to death. And when you've sown the dragon's teeth, throw a stone into the middle of the crops that grow there. Remember, throw a stone or you will certainly die." The next morning the Greeks and the people of Colchis gathered at the field of Aes. As Jason approached the bull, the crowd watched fearfully. It seemed that he must be scorched to death by their fiery breath. But the flames licked harmlessly about him, and he was untouched. Then, as he spoke soothing words to them, the anger of the bulls seemed to die away, and they allowed Jason to yoke them to the plough, drive them up and down the field. Thus was the first of the tasks done. Jason now picked up the bag of dragon's teeth and strode up and down the furrows, sowing the seed as he went. "This is easy enough," he said to himself. "This is child's play." But he was wrong, for after he had finished the sowing, a crop began to grow, and it was not green corn that sprouted forth, but a crop of fully armed soldiers. Jason gazed in astonishment, and his astonishment soon turned to fear, for the soldiers pointed their spears threateningly at Jason and prepared to advance on him. Jason was trapped. How could he fight an army, unarmed and single-handed? But then he remembered Medea's advice. He picked up a rock and hurled it through the air so that it landed near the rear of the armed men and struck one of the soldiers. From where he'd been standing, the soldier could not see where one of the stones had come from, and he thought it had been thrown by one of his companions, and leaping to his feet, he struck out at the nearest man. In hitting back, the second man struck his neighbour a blow, and instantly the neighbour struck out in turn, and soon a fierce battle had begun, and all Jason had to do was stand back and watch as his enemies slaughtered each other to the last man. King Aeetes was furious, but he pretended to admire the young Greek's courage. "Well done, Jason," he told him. "You're a brave and clever one. Tomorrow you shall have the fleece." Jason was triumphant. He had won, but that night Medea came to him with bad news. "My father's word is not to be trusted," she told Jason. "He means to kill you tomorrow, and he will kill me too, for he knows that it was I who helped you. This is what you must do now. Rouse your men and tell them to make ready to sail, but do it secretly. Meanwhile you and I will fetch the fleece, now, by dead of night." So while the Argonauts hurried stealthily down to their ship, Jason and Medea went off into the woods. It was pitch dark, but Medea knew the tracks of the forest, and they arrived safely at a clearing. On a tree was the Golden Fleece, shining through the night with a mysterious glow, and there below it was a gigantic guardian dragon. It was a fearful monster, and even Jason started back in horror. But the magic of Medea was equal to the task. Muttering secret spells, she sprinkled special herbs in front of the dragon. Its forked tongue licked them up, and in a moment it was fast asleep. Instantly Jason plucked down the fleece, and they hurried triumphantly back to their ship. An hour later, as dawn began to break, the Argonauts rowed with muffled oars away. The fleece was theirs, the task was done, and now Jason could return to claim his rightful throne. Cool. Thanks, Mum. Love you.